everyone gets AT&T's best deal on the new iPhone 14 Pro with the incredible camera. So, people currently listening to comedy podcasts, and people listening to political podcasts, and people listening to true crime podcasts who actually can't stop listening to true crime podcasts and it's ruling their lives. The point is, everyone, new and existing customers. Ask how to get up to $800 off the new iPhone 14 Pro with eligible trade-in. Visit att.com or our stores for details. Terms and restrictions may apply.
So the day that it crossed a million, I don't know honestly what day, because by the time I checked it was like 1.1 something million. I was like, oh, cool, I'm a millionaire. Okay, great.
And then eat Cai Fan.
Okay, to be fair, that was at night before I slept, right? So I like, okay, cool. So just turn off the phone and I went to sleep and I went to work the next day. So very, very uneventful day. Just like how most big things.
Hello, my name is Andrew and welcome back to another episode of Chill with TFC. My guest today took the fast track to financial independence and achieved $1 million at the young age of 29 through investing. He's a speaker and trainer by profession, a retail investor who manages his own money, and he calls himself a Singaporean nerd who is madly in love with Cai Fan, which is economy rice in Singapore. His name is Max Koh, and over the next 2 episodes, we'll explore how Max achieved millionaire status at the age of 29 and also what life is like after achieving that million. Right, welcome back to the show, Max.
Hello. Yeah.
Hi. Okay, because you've been on the show a few times.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you can just search for Max Koh on our TFC episodes. Not just TFC, right? Also on the Stock Geek Out as well.
Yeah.
You can find out your history, but we still have to talk a bit about how you achieved it so that, you know, the rest of the conversation.
Just for the new people that just joined, the new coconuts.
We have new listeners.
Okay.
This is Max Koh. He's achieved 1 million at 29 years old. Yeah. And that has been about 2 to 3 years.
Yeah, it's been about 2 to 3 years.
Yeah. So how did you first achieve that first million?
So I think I'll kind of break it down into a few phases. So mainly like 3 phases, right? So there's the career part, there's the savings part, and then there's the investing part. So I think, to be very upfront, I think everyone's expecting me to say, to achieve the first million, it's some investing tip or some stock that I bought or whatever, because mainly my specialty is in stocks. I don't do any crypto or coins or whatever. But to be upfront, I think the phase is actually more so I was very, very blessed and exceptionally lucky. Like, I had a good career. I think, to be upfront, it's fantastic bosses, fantastic mentors who kind of saw my passion. So a bit of backstory for the newer people. So my background comes from training, speaking, public speaking. So I come more from the seminar and the marketing space, the training development industry. So that's what I've loved since young. I've always loved inspiring, teaching people from stage and just kind of like sharing my stories and what have you, right? So kind of came across great mentors and bosses who kind of gave me that platform to speak. So I think that played a very big part, because for myself, finding a career that you really love and you can just put your heart and soul into it, it becomes like play to me. So I was working in a great job that paid really well, and because of the nature of the training industry, you're speaking one to many, right? So there was scalability in the income as well. So I'm just compressing all these things here. So I think the first phase was the career, and the work and the proper mentors and guidance did help me generate that first pot of gold that they call it, so the capital base. And then number 2, I've always been like a typical middle income kid since young. So I've always been trained and taught to save and be frugal. But I took it to a whole new level where I have like a daily, monthly tracking expense spreadsheet. So I've always been a very hardcore saver. So in my early days, in fact till now still, I would track everything on an Excel spreadsheet. So I don't use any of those apps and everything, because I like to go down to the detail, and so that I can form my own monthly, weekly graphs, what have you. So very high savings rate in the early days of, I would say, because of I was lucky to have higher income. So savings rate up to like 70%, sometimes even 80%, which I know is not doable for people who have kids and everything. So I think caveat is I was single and I'm still single. So because of that, it's a lot easier to kind of manage my expenses on my own. And then from the last part was just investing in the right businesses and stocks that took me to cross that $1 million. So if I were to break it down, that's the 3 phases. But quite honestly, it's the first phase that formed the base, and then the rest of it kind of was like a cherry or icing on the cake was the investing part that came in.
So for the whole saga, the whole trilogy of Max's
Yes,
story, check
that's
out
right.
previous episodes of TFC.
Yes, I think we shared more there.
So I'll summarize it even further, right? So 3 phases, right? The first phase is where you picked a high income career with no ceiling on your salary.
Yep.
That's one.
Yep.
Number 2, high savings rate. You cut down on expenses.
Yep.
You don't spend a lot.
Yep.
Number 3, you invest in a portfolio of concentrated portfolio.
Yeah.
And it's in growth stocks and tech stocks, right?
Yeah, I would say it's a mixture of growth, tech, and companies that I myself really like. For example, there's also like fitness companies, whatever, which I did share on some previous podcasts. But yes, generally growth stocks and companies that I feel have a longer runway to grow. But we're not share too much here because this is not an investing episode, right?
Oh, we could talk a bit about investments here and there.
Okay.
So it propelled you to your first million.
Yep.
And because your style was more concentrated, it was a portfolio of concentrated stocks.
Yeah.
And so what do you think? Just now you mentioned that you still think that the first phase contributes more.
Yeah.
So between earning high income and investments, it's still earning high income that contributed to the first million.
It is. And I think I'll share my take, which may be a very unpopular opinion. So sorry if you're going to dislike this video. But like, I always feel for a lot of people, let's say your savings in the bank or your capital base is, let's say, I just put a random number, just as arbitrary numbers like 10K, 20K, and then hoping that the 10K and 20K can turn into $1 million in 5 years. I mean, is it possible? Maybe if you buy the right coin or you buy some more speculative assets, right? But the fact is, in the earlier, so I think the caveat to that statement was, in the early years, your income growth, your actual income and the savings rate would form a bigger proportion of your eventual outcome, or would play a bigger determinant of the eventual outcome rather than your investment. So I'm not saying you shouldn't invest. I think everyone should start investing ASAP. But in the earliest, you shouldn't be investing to turn that 10K into $1 million, but more so because you want to develop the skill sets to learn how to analyze companies or to grow that wealth, because knowing how to grow wealth or compound is also a skill set. So it's just to build the skill set such that when your capital base is decent enough, then you'll be able to kind of hit that $1 million. So I think I can share. So for me, right, I think kind of, because it's been a few years, right? The day that I crossed my first 100K in the bank, and back then I haven't really started investing that hardcore. So I was just buying the ETFs. I was dollar cost averaging. So yes, that's how I started off as well. Dollar cost averaging into the S&P 500, the SPY, right? So, but I was doing like a little bit of individual stock picking here and there, but my capital was a lot smaller. So I just used it as a phase to gain experience. But the very day that my savings crossed 100K, which I recall was in the OCBC 360 account. That's not a plug, but genuinely, I am in like saving in the OCBC 360 account.
OCBC can find us.
Yeah. Please give me some affiliate fees if that ever happens. Like the day that you cross 100K, and I don't mean to sound like cocky or arrogant or what, I knew that sooner or later the million would come, because having 100K to hit it to $1 million, it's actually doable. Of course, I don't know when it will come. Maybe it take me 10 years, take me like 20 years, whatsoever. I didn't expect it to be a lot fast due to the stocks that I pay. I think that's a lot of luck involved as well. But to me, if I count that, hey, like the $1 million will come sooner or later, because it just told me that, hey, I have the discipline needed to save 100K. I have the ability to keep my costs low. And number 3, I have the ability to just know how to manage my expenses. So all these things make me realize that actually, if I look back on my own journey, like the ability to save plays a very big part in building that capital base needed to hit that $1 million. So
the 100K is your real physical evidence to affirm to yourself that, hey, actually, if I can do 100K, I can do $1 million.
Yeah, it is.
How many years? When did you get that 100K? And then when was the 1 million?
So I can't exactly recall, but it's been about,
I don't know, let's say,
I think 5 years plus.
5 years to 10x.
5 years, about
10x
that.
from 100K to 1 million.
Oh, you mean like from 100K to $1 million? Oh, that's I think about like 3 years plus.
3 years.
Yeah, 3 years plus.
10x.
But I would say, okay, to be fair, the 10x didn't come just from that 100K staying there and then hitting $1 million, because along that 3 years, I was still working. I'm still working, so the income continued to come in. So it's not like that 100K become 10x purely from investment. So I'm not like a Buffett or some saint. Yeah.
Right. I mean, you work hard to get the income coming in. So look at 100K, and then it gives you the confidence that you will achieve 1 million. But how do you feel when you achieve the 1 million? This time not in your OCBC account. This time it's in your stock portfolio,
stock portfolio, right? Yeah. So I think you're the first person to ever ask that, like, how did it feel, right? Because most people, when they hear 1 million, they're just impressed, but they don't really dig deeper. So to be completely transparent, And I don't mean to burst anyone's bubble, but
Feels like another day.
Yeah, it just really felt like another day.
Right.
I think to kind of break it down, because I think by now you can tell I'm quite a nerdy person. I like to overanalyze things, right? So I do a lot of self-reflection and on my own time. And when I look back on the day that I crossed a million, 29 years old, honestly, I felt nothing. It was because it's split into two phases, right? So the day that you cross the million in the Interactive Brokers account for me, which is the stock brokerage app that I use.
IBAKR can also find us.
Yeah, exactly. That was intentional. Yeah. So like I was really expecting to cross a million, because it's not like before that I totally am unaware and like, hey, I wake up one day, oh my goodness, I'm a millionaire. It wasn't that kind of lottery feeling.
It
It's
was
more like
a windfall.
yes, it's like because first of all, I check my stock brokerage account like once a week due to my own habits of like monitoring my stocks, right? So like when it was like 500k, 600k, 700k, 800k whatsoever, I was really aware that it was growing already. So I think the metaphor to give is, I've a lot of psychological books, they would say like, when you go for a vacation or a holiday, or whether it's like Maldives or somewhere you can't wait to go to. Normally it's the anticipation leading up to that mark that's or that day that you travel that's a lot more exciting than the actual holiday itself. And this felt the same way. So like the build up when I was at like 500, 600, 700, I'm like, oh yes, it's coming. It's like I feel so excited. But then on the day they hit a million, you were already expecting it to happen. So honestly, what really happened was, I can share like the scene by scene breakdown because I still remember. I looked at my phone and it was like 1.1 or 1.1-ish million. That's the reason why I share, because I only check weekly. So the day that it crossed a million, I don't know honestly what day, because by the time I checked, it was like 1.1 something million. I was like, oh, cool, I'm a millionaire. Okay, great.
And then eat Cai Fan.
Okay, to be fair, that was at night before I slept, right? So I like, okay, cool. So just turn off the phone and I went to sleep and I went to work the next day. So very, very uneventful day. Just like how most big things we always think about, it's all in the imagination for the build up and the anticipation, and not so much the actual day of it. Yeah.
I mean, you planned for it, you worked hard for it. Okay, so that was your reaction, but how about the people around you? Friends, family?
Okay, so I think I'll share a bit of a backstory. I'm quite comfortable coming on this podcast because I think number one, like I've been here a few times. They have great hosts and they have great people that make me feel comfortable. But yeah, I mean, normally I wouldn't be so comfortable to share all these things publicly because I still got very typical Asian genes within me. That it's just very self-conscious and not so comfy talking about income especially. So I think to share, and what happens is none of my friends and family knew about it for a good 2+ years. In fact, I only started talking about this millionaire achievement and journey since the start of 2022, which is just the last 6 months. And the reason, I think, to just cut the long story short, was because I launched a mini investing course with a good friend of mine called Thomas, where we just, out of passion, wanted to teach people investing. And because of that, you have to have some credibility, or like people are like, who the hell are you to be teaching me investing? Why should I learn from you? So that's the only reason I decided to like share that openly. But before that, quite frankly, none of my friends knew, none of my colleagues knew, none of my family members knew, and I was very private about it. In fact, I really guarded and made it a point to guard it very, very close to my chest. And I think you're probably going to ask, what's the reason for that, right? So I'm just a weirdo lah. So my school of thought, because I come more from the marketing background, the speaking background, so there's a lot of psychological books I've read since young that's shaped the way I run my life and the way I behave, my values, and even my investments, right? So one reason I was so guarded about this was for a few reasons. Number one, I didn't want myself to be anchored to the label of a millionaire. And this is something I realized across the years of like, before I hit my own 7 figures, reading a lot of books, articles of like, whether it's ultra successful people, that the way that society sees you, or the way that your friends see you, if they see you as a certain like multi-millionaire or like billionaires. And then we've heard stories where people just overnight, where they just lose their wealth due to no reason whatsoever in their part, or no responsibility on their part. It's just a black swan, or like just random bad luck, right? And then it's very hard to climb back up again, because in their life, in their identity is shaped as, oh, I'm this multi-billionaire, millionaire, and then so they're just better in terms of the esteem and the moral and stuff. So I made it a very clear point. I didn't want to be labeled as a millionaire, because I think, let's face it, right, the truth is, years from now, how life will unwind, I never know. I could lose it all when I do something stupid. Hopefully that doesn't happen. I could one day donate the whole lump sum away if I find another higher spiritual meaning in life whatsoever. And then when that day comes, if I want to make these decisions where, let's say I want to, example, donate away, or I just want to make a certain move that changes my net worth because it's no longer a priority, and when that day comes, I don't want to be tied down to, but over the last 7 years or whatever, like all my friends have been looking at me like a millionaire, and subconsciously it's going to force me to double think my actions. So I want to live a life where I am my own sovereign individual, where I can just make the call whatever I want, and that money or that identity or that label is not plastered on my forehead, oh, this is a millionaire. So I kept it very close to my chest for the longest time, and that's the reason why I still eat Thai fan every day. In fact, I still go in like shorts and flip-flops everywhere I go. The only reason I'm not in shorts and flip-flops now is because this is an interview, so
respect,
gotta be a bit more proper. Even though the ex-host that I did an interview with was on shorts and flip-flops, refer to the previous episode. But my point is, that was one reason, and the second reason more so was because I just didn't know how to actually, like, it's just very weird. Like, how do you go to your friends, hey,
I'm a millionaire.
Yeah, I'm a millionaire. Like, what the hell, man? Like, nobody's gonna say that. So for those reasons, I don't say it. And psychologically, I just wanted to protect myself from being stuck in that label or that identity.
Actually, the whole Millionaire at 29 reminds me of, back then, Adam Khoo's Millionaire at age 26 story. I'm sure you've heard of it.
Actually, he's one of the reasons I was very inspired to start this whole self-help investment, personal finance journey. So a bit of backstory. So when I was younger, I came across Adam Khoo, attended his programs as well. And of course, I think what happens is saw him on the news, and I was like, I want to be that guy, because first of all, Adam Khoo's a speaker, which is the profession that I'm in, and he was, to be upfront, the reason I even came to this industry was I was very inspired by Adam Khoo speaking on stage. I was like, young, rebellious kid with shitty grades back then in school. I was like, wow, you can be a speaker on stage, make jokes and make people laugh, and then get paid really well. Of course, there was the young me being very naive. Actually, there's a lot more behind the scenes as to that. But so that was the reason I started, since you brought Adam Khoo. And also that was the reason why I wanted to hit my first million at a young age as well. So to be fair, you brought up a very good point, which is Adam Khoo's part of the reasons that actually motivated me to want to hit my own version of financial freedom at a young age.
Yeah, but I think your story is a little more grounded, because I know Max, middle class family, really no huge financial support from the family. Like, you really earn your own million by age 29. I mean, 3 years later than Adam. But
Damn.
But here's the thing. We have different starting points.
Sure.
Adam Khoo's starting point is quite different from yours.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I feel that I can relate to your story a little bit more.
Okay, I hope he doesn't watch this episode though, because he's really one of my childhood idols, and I have a lot of respect for him. So yes,
right, he's inspired you.
Yeah,
I mean, but I'm just talking about different starting point, making a difference, right? I mean, if you are, I can just give a hypothetical scenario. If you are the eldest child of a family with 4 younger siblings, let's say your mom is sick, your dad has to quit his job to. If you start businesses, if you invest, it's higher risk, right?
Yes. Yeah. Definitely so.
Of course, that's not to undermine Adam's own efforts in his own journey as well.
For sure.
But everybody has a different journey. So I think what people can take away from this episode, right? Like, this is just your story.
Yeah.
Like, personal finance is very personal. Like, if you're listening to this, you find
nailed it. Yeah. So
find your own way there, man.
I think you mentioned something that was a very humbling experience for me. I can share that only happened about 1 year back. So what happens is, and back then, of course, I've crossed my first million for, I think, 1 year plus, right? So I'm a bit used to that. And then I think there was one day that a few friends of mine over the years, they will ask me, like, how do you actually, build financial security? So they don't know that I'm a millionaire, but they know that I'm certainly financially stable, and they will ask for tips. And I always say that, you know what, you got to work hard, and the typical advice, like, like, save your first 100K, and then because once that is done, you really have capital, go invest it. Because if most people, by the time you're a lot older and you don't have that at least financially stability to show for, then it's really your fault and your responsibility. So I used to use that as like a preaching advice to share with friends. But then only 1 year ago, I completely changed my mind on that. And I felt that. So I think, you really gave me that interjection point, right? And it was such a humbling experience because of something that you mentioned. So I think to give some background, I come from a middle income family, but my middle income family was really, and I'm the only child, right? So I have like all the love and all the support showered on me. So even though I didn't have like a bungalow or landed property to stay in since I was young, but it's a very comfortable upbringing. So I didn't have to, I'll just be upfront, I never had to go a day hungry. I can never be one of those that gives you the very sexy story where I eat like Kong Guan biscuits and Maggie mee, and then there were loan sharks outside my house, because I know friends like that, but I didn't have to go through any of that. So it's very, very comfortable upbringing. And so because of that, I formed that basis of that advice I shared just now, which is that most people, if by the time you're old and you're not at least financially secure, it's your own fault. But then I met a friend of mine for dinner, and she's a self-made entrepreneur, similar age, in fact, a bit younger than me, runs like online businesses and does about like 5-6K a month, which isn't much, but it's still very decent from an online business while still working full-time. And I still recall over Starbucks coffee, and we got into a very intellectual, deep discussion, which I love. And similarly, she was like many of my other friends asking me for like financial advice and strategies and whatever. And I was just sharing this same philosophy that I just shared. And she cut me off and said something. She said like, Max, but have you ever wondered that maybe you're able to hit your own version of financial security or stability because since young, you actually have quite a stable upbringing? What about those people who, which is what you mentioned just now, have like maybe 4 siblings to support, and then when they are in university, or for some, maybe even worse, when they are in army or when they are in like JC or poly, suddenly there's news that, oh, the dad just got cancer, there isn't an insurance policy, or actually the dad's bankrupt, the dad owes money to loan sharks that they never knew and they have to start paying, and then like the mother just approaches them and like, you know what, dear, I'm sorry, I think you have to start paying a bit for the family's burdens because I can't fork out everything myself, for example. And then she started telling me her own story, and it's a bit similar like this, where her dad went through certain bankruptcies and issues, and she had to fork out her own pocket money from university, from a tuition, part-time fees. And even when she went to start work, right, in a normal 9-to-5 job, most of the salary savings after expenses, everything was going to the family's covering of the debts for the dad, right? So she shared all this with me very privately, and I was like, wow, that very day I went home, I felt so freaking humble, and I felt so blessed at the same time, because I was like, yeah, that's so true. Like, I was able to hit this millionaire by 29 is because along the years, in my early start of the years, which we all know compounding, the earlier you start, the better, and the faster it goes at the later stage, right? I didn't have anyone need to interrupt this process for me. I didn't need to pay certain expenses or need to bear certain burdens, whether it's illnesses or debts or what have you. So all that money that I could save with that high savings rate I mentioned went into compounding. But if I was someone like her, and I'm sure her story is not common, it's not uncommon, it's a lot of people going through that as well, where you have to pay bills, pay certain burdens, and because of that, by the time you're done paying, you're in your maybe early 30s, which is nothing wrong, it's still considered early, but that's where they start the real financial journey, and because of that, that's where the compounding really starts. So maybe because of that, they only achieve it at maybe in their mid-40s or 50s, and then we're like, oh, actually it's not that impressive. But to be fair, it's in no choosing of theirs, they were just dealt that hand, and so that really just made me so humble, and I just ate my words. And from then on, I just stopped giving the advice where, you know what, make your first 100K and then afterwards go invest, because if you're not going to do so, by the time you're old, you have only yourself to blame. I think that's a very, very arrogant statement, and I learned a lot of that. So thanks for bringing that up. Totally forgot that lesson.
So we acknowledge whatever privileges we have, but at the same time, we recognize that we're all at different phases and stages in life. We're all held different cards to work with, right?
Exactly.
And in your case, you played the best hand that you had.
Yeah, and I had a very, very decent hand to start with. So in no choosing of mine, whatever higher power you believe in, whatever spiritual person you believe in, like it's in no like credit of mine that I got this hand and I played it well. But I think to a lot of people who had tougher hands, I feel that a lot of times in society, we always look at the end outcome. This person's a millionaire, this person's just sold a startup for $5 billion at 29, whatever. It's cool, but you don't look at the starting point. And I think for me, my starting point, it's definitely, I would say, above average already. So taking that into account, I personally feel that whenever I look at someone else's achievements who may not have like that million by what age, but looking at their starting point, I feel like, you know what, I cannot hold a candle to that. So you completely nailed it.
And of course, being a millionaire is not the end goal of life. It's not the only goal as well. I mean, if you're listening to this podcast, you're looking for some form of financial security, freedom, independence, whatever it is, right?
Yes.
But a million or whatever, 100K is just different checkpoints for you to assess your journey. There are more things in life, of which we are trying to find out, so what's life like after $1 million? You still track your expenses.
Yeah, I still do.
After $1 million. Is it necessary? So much money already is to check.
I think old habits die hard. So I'm just a kiam siap kind of miser. For those of you who are international foreign friends, kiam siap means like miserly, cheapskate.
Cheapskate with yourself, not necessarily with
myself,
loved ones, right?
I'm not. So your question is, how's life after the million, right?
And about tracking expenses, how do you track? How detailed? Like, every time you pay money, you
Every
take out the phone
single
and
time, yes.
you
Which
use
is
an app or something. Right?
the app is called Google
Notes.
Sheets.
Google Sheets.
Yeah,
Every single expense.
Every
One
single
cup
expense.
of coffee,
Yes.
$1. Okay, now $1.20.
Yes,
But
yes.
yeah.
Yeah, I do. Yeah. Later on, I'll show you because my phone's not with me now. It's on the table there. So I track it down to the dollar, and then afterwards, so I have a net income column, which is after you minus CPF and everything, and then I have a expenses column all in. And then I have a net savings column, which tabulates the difference, and then savings percentage, and then a month on month and a year on year, and then I can see the difference last year and this year to see whether I'm getting a bit naughty and kind of like starting to feel a bit more comfortable. So that really helps me to understand whether I'm swaying off. Because I think for me, it's the millionaire's journey never just been about the million, right? It's always been about I just want that choice and that power, like the ability to say no, I don't want to do this, and you want to do it, you go do it yourself. So it's a bit of a selfish agenda. I just want to be my own sovereign individual, whatever. So that's why I still track it down to that intense basis. And the reason people ask me, why don't you use like certain apps? Because I know there's a lot of these personal finance apps these days, right?
Well, it's like the credit card bill, the debit at the end of the day.
Yeah. So and the reason is because I think I'm just old school. So I think no particular reason. I just like the control of being able to kind of put my own formulas into the sheets and everything. So that's why I do
regarding
track
expenses,
it.
I have a personal experience to share, and
Yeah.
I'll see if you agree or not.
Yeah.
Because I did that before. So
Okay.
I have an app on my phone.
Yeah.
That was a long time ago, more than
Yeah.
10 years ago.
Yeah.
And similarly, every time I top up my EasyLink card, every small little expense, 50 cents, I just track it in.
Yeah.
I might miss here and there, but
Yeah.
I would say 99% of my expenses are tracked.
Yeah.
I did that for, was it maybe a year?
Wow, okay,
So I
cool.
think you're still doing it now. You've been doing it for years. I
Yeah.
did it for 1 year. My experience from that is that it's useful because it helps you to see where your money is going, and you realize, okay, you're taking too much taxis. Back then it was cabs.
Yeah.
You're living a good life. You must cut down on your transport expenses. So that's good. It gives you an overview. But I think what's not too good for me is that it makes me focus too much on the nitty gritty in life. Yeah, and I'm missing, when you look at the trees, you miss the forest, that kind of feeling. Yeah,
Yes.
it feels that I'm just too focused on the small stuff. Do you have that feeling though?
To be fair, I face that, and there are days I question myself as well. Is this like, am I overdoing it, right? So I don't have the best answer. Just old habits die hard. So I'm just used to it, and I cannot stop doing it. And I guess my personality, I'm just very analytical, and I just like to know. And so for me, it's like, so I think this is in line with another question that you asked just now, is this, how is life like after being a millionaire? So I think I'll share a bit more, and that will kind of reveal a bit of this question. So life after millionaire, I bought 2 BMs, I've bought a Mercedes Benz. No, I'm just joking. Right? I just wanted to see the serious face.
I knew you.
It's like, that doesn't make
we're
sense.
waiting for the Grab to go home that day. I'm like, where I got bands? You
I
could
bought
just
2
send me home.
Benz, and then I have a Ducati in like the garage. So what happens is, how's life like after millionaire? I still eat the same old stuff every day, which is the one and only Cai Fan. So
Hey, this dude posted on his Facebook, there was like $11.70 Cai
Yeah,
Fan,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
And you
$11.40,
were so
yeah.
shocked. I'm like, oh, love millionaire. No, I'm kidding.
I was pissed. I was genuinely pissed that someone charged me $11 for Cai Fan. Like, okay, but I think inflation and whatever.
Inflation.
Yeah. So, but anyway, I think just to segue a little bit, like the reason I love economy rice or vegetable rice is that it's like a buffet to me. Like after, and because I work out, so I need the protein sources. And like, where else can you get this amount of 3 meat or 2 meat for like less than $10? I mean, like, it's tough, right? So, and then normally if you eat like, I don't know, fish soup or whatever, it's like them pathetic slices of fish. Okay, anyway, I
So
digress.
you track calories too, right?
I do, yeah.
Wait,
So
you track everything
I'm
in
an
your life.
obsessive tracker. I track
Yeah.
my sleep. I track my number of minutes I meditate a day. So, I mean, I don't think anyone wants to be like me, but that's just my personality. So anyway, my point is, so I still track these expenses day to day, and I realized after I crossed my first million, there's only one thing that I started doing differently, which this one is, it was intentional. It was in every 6 months I do like a journal reflection of my own last 6 months and how I think I can improve. And this was about 1 year after I crossed my first million, and I was like, okay, I think it's time to be a bit wiser with how I use my money. So the keyword is wiser, not like looser. I told myself, I want to use my money to buy back a bit of time, because I was super frugal in my early years, right? So of course you normally exchange time just to save that bit of money, which may not be wise, but I think that worked for me in my personality. So I wrote down that, okay, I'm going to travel more in Grabs and cabs and taxis. So my expenses have ballooned by a fair bit since the early days where I was saving 80% of my savings. That's never happened for a long time since then already because of the Grab and expenses. But that buys me more time to, on these Grabs or these taxi trips, to read the books that I want to read. So it's still all about improvement and trying to grow further. But I still take the MRTs quite often. It's just that sometimes when I want to just kind of cut through the commute traffic, I use like Grabs and all that. So that is how I track these expenses. And so to answer the question very in a long-winded way, that tracking, even though you mentioned, and sometimes I also ask myself, am I overdoing it? But the usefulness comes not in the day-to-day. The usefulness comes in the month-to-month and the year-on-year. So for you, it's because unfortunately you only tracked it for like 1 year. So you should have done it for another 12 months. And then then you would see like, hey, last year July versus this year July, what was my expenses like? And what was my expenses this year? And then I could also see the savings percentage, because the income I earned last year and this year may be different. So that will allow me to kind of see how I'm actually loosening up, or how I'm actually, whether it's staying the same over the year. So to me, the usefulness comes more across time, because tracking for the sake of looking on a day-to-day basis is super micro, right? You want to look at it contextually across time. So that is what helps. And so, yeah, this answers the question, I hope. Yeah.
How has your life changed? Not too much. You still eat Cai Fan. You just grab a bit more, but sometimes you do take public transport. Anything else?
No, so the main thing is really the Grab. The Grab.
How about mentally and psychologically? I mean, you mentioned one thing, now you can give the middle finger to people, right? It gives you that
That's
confidence,
what we share in private. Yeah.
You know, just like I say, like, you can screw you and do your own things, because you mentioned power. I will also add autonomy to that, like freedom to do whatever you want, right? How about, spiritually, mentally, emotionally, how has it changed?
So I would say, obviously, I wouldn't lie, right? I mean, it's definitely a lot more peace of mind knowing that you have that money that's liquid, right? Because it's not like stuck in some property, whatever, it's liquid. Even though the downside to liquidity is always there is volatility and fluctuations, especially now, July 2022 in growth stocks. I think you all know what's happening, right? But
your net worth has gone down, but it's still more than $1 million right now.
Yes. So I would say, thankfully, because I was lucky where I crossed that 7 figures a bit earlier. So despite the drawdowns, I'm still okay. Hopefully, it stays this way, but nobody knows. Which is why, back to my earlier point as to, I don't want that label or identity crushed on me, because one day for some reason I made a stupid move and all stocks go to zero, for example. Then if I'm starting from scratch, hey, you know what? At least I'm not burdened by that label of a millionaire, right? So, but my point is, to your question, any changes in spiritual? No, it's just mentally I feel safer. There's only two main things I spend a lot more on. Number one is actually taxis and Grab, which I mentioned, because I want to travel more in comfort and the ability to buy back time. Number two, I actually spend a lot more time networking with friends and people that I just really love and just want to hang out with, whether it's for learning, for growth, or just to catch up. I'm more willing to kind of like just, in the past we always go Dutch, I'm more willing to let them I'll just foot the bill. Please don't use that against me. Okay,
let's go for me after this.
I think, and the reason is because I just see, like, I see as investing in another form. It's just investing relationships, right? Whereas I think a bit about myself and to show you how warped I am, and that's why I think, quite frankly, the millionaire life may not be for everybody, or at least through the way I did it, it's really not recommended. Even though now I've been through. In my early days, I was a classic no man, like the yes man. Everything you say yes. I'm the extreme opposite, and mine was really extremely bad. I would say no to everything. Where like you want to ask me out, of course I won't say no in your face because I have social EQ, right? So I will find a way to sneak out and I'll say, oh, I'm busy, blah blah. I'll share a true story though. Now that you reminded me, like it got so bad to the point where there was one day, it was my birthday. So my birthday falls in September, and my whole life I've never been a big fan of birthdays.
But because just another day.
Yeah, because I mean, to me, my belief is my birthday is the day that I should give thanks to the person who gave birth to me, which is my mom. And but I'm sure everyone's gonna think I'm nuts, but I think the birthday is some day, the day where you thank the people who brought you into this earth, and not so much. It's not really about yourself, right? So I've never really believe in the concept of birthdays. Oh, you're gonna go and have a bunch of cakes and shit, right? So pardon me. So there was one day, my birthday years ago, my boss, my mentor, great friend of mine who I really owe a lot to, asked me, hey Max, today's your birthday, why not we go out for dinner? I'll buy you dinner, let's celebrate together. And I said, no, actually I'm busy. And of course he knows me because he's my mentor, right? Then back then he had a kid that was just born, like a 1-year-old baby. He still take up his young son and like, look at this face, he wants to go out with you. Are you gonna say no to that? Because his son was just beside, right? And because I really love his son, it's so cute, right? I was like, no, to be fair,
you say no.
Yeah, I say no. Yeah, to the baby face.
To the baby's face.
Yeah, but I gave a legit reason. I said, it's because actually my mom wants to celebrate with me and so because of that, it's legit reason. Here's the truth. I think you know the reason. Okay. My mom asked me the same question on that day. Of course, as being my mother, I'm the only child. Like, hey, do you want to go out for dinner? Oh no, my boss asked me out for dinner. So
But what do you want to do? You want to spend time alone?
Yeah. So what happened? True story. I went out to the library because I couldn't go home because my mom's at home, right? So I couldn't, because I would like kind of spoil the alibi. So I went out to the library, sit there and read books, like self-help books. And I felt so happy that day. So my point is, I was the classic no man, everything I would say no. And because I really saw a lot of opportunity cost in time. So I was obsessed with how I allocated my time, which I think you can tell from the way I track obsessively all the different things. So, and I think that helped me build a lot of the assets that I built when I was younger in terms of building skill sets, building knowledge and investing, learning. So I was a machine for learning and growth and self-help and stuff. So that gave me the skill sets needed. But once I crossed that million, I asked myself, I think I should use that money to buy back the time that I've lost and the networks that I've maybe indirectly, unknowingly burned and the bridges by being a big rejecter of everything. And so now these days, I say yes a lot more often. And quite frankly, I'm a lot happier. Like I've realized that like my biggest regret now looking back is, shit, I should have done that earlier, like because the doors, opportunities open for you a lot more. Number two, when you feel that genuine connection with someone that you never once knew his past story, his backstory, and like, wow, I should have asked this person out for coffee years ago, would have been like closer friends and everything. So yeah, big regret of mine, but I guess things happen for a reason, right? So yeah, that's the only two things that changed: the traveling and more comfort and more time for myself, and investing more in relationships and people.
And that was part 1 of our conversation with Max. Thank you for listening. I hope you've learned something useful today. Check out next week's episode for part 2 of the interview, where we find out more about what life is like after achieving financial freedom. And also get more tips on how to look at money, how to plan your finances, and how to manage your investment portfolio. Stay tuned.
Imagine having one extra day every week. More time to cook healthy meals, work on that novel, or just binge some good reality TV. Now it's all possible with ClickUp, the productivity platform that'll save you one day a week on work guaranteed. It's packed with features and customization options that no other productivity tool has, so you can work the way you work best. Use code BizTech to get 15% off ClickUp's massive unlimited plan for a year, meaning you can start reclaiming your time for under $5 a month. Sign up today at ClickUp.com and use code BizTech. Hurry, this offer ends soon.